All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are going to be looking into, well, something that a lot of you might be thinking, why am I even doing this?
Hmm.
And that's math and physics.
Yeah.
You see a big long equation or some crazy physics principle, and it's
Uh,
like, when am I ever going to use this? You know what I mean?
I get that. I totally get that.
So that's what we're going to try to unpack today. We're going to deep dive into this, see if we can figure out why getting a grip on these subjects, math and physics,
Hmm.
could actually be a really, really good thing for you down the line,
Yeah, for sure.
no matter what it is you decide to do. And we've got some pretty cool research for this one. I'm excited about this. We're going to be looking at, what kind of jobs are out there, how this stuff is used in the real world, and we'll even get into how it can kind of shape the way you think.
Right. And I think one of the first things we need to address is that people often see math and physics as these separate things, just subjects to get through in school. But if you take a step back, you can start to see them as like languages, really, really important languages for understanding the world around us.
Okay, so I like this. Let's unpack this language idea. I
Eh.
mean, I did see in some of the research that, math and physics got called the language of the universe, even the OS behind everything. That sounds pretty big, but I'm not really sure what that actually means, on a practical level.
Right. I mean, it sounds kind of out there, doesn't it? But think of it this way. So many things that happen in nature, and also like the tech that we build, it can all be described with math equations, right?
Hmm.
And those equations, they're like sentences in this special language. And just like the operating system on your computer, it controls how everything works. These math and physics principles, well, they're the rules that kind of run the whole physical world.
Okay, so are we saying like even something like social media, is that actually running on math?
Absolutely.
Get
Yeah.
out.
Every time you scroll through your feed, you know the order of those posts. That's all decided by algorithms, and algorithms are just sets of math rules, often using probabilities to try and guess what you want to see next.
Okay.
Same goes for recommendations on YouTube. They're using math to figure out what videos you might like.
That is wild.
It's everywhere.
So it's like it's more than just, on our computers and online then.
Oh, for sure.
Our sources were saying like you hop on an electric scooter,
Yeah.
you're flying in a plane, even just walking across a bridge.
Truly, yeah.
You're depending on all this math and physics stuff, right?
Yeah. You're relying on all the work that engineers and designers did, and they use, those basic math and physics principles to make all that stuff work. Like, think about Newton's laws of motion. Remember those from school?
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah. Those are super important for designing all sorts of things, like the scooters, airplanes, even those little delivery robots you see zipping around in some cities.
Wow. Okay, I'm starting to get it. So physics basically helps us figure out, you know, how things move and why, like all the forces and energy and how stuff interacts.
Exactly.
And then math gives us the language to describe all that precisely.
Yeah.
So we can actually like build stuff, make sure it works.
Right, like those bridges you mentioned. We need math to make sure they're strong and stable. And airplanes, obviously, they need to fly. That takes a lot of math and physics to get right.
Makes sense, yeah. So beyond these kind of everyday examples, are there any skills, like specific skills, that we pick up by studying math and physics?
Oh, absolutely. And these are skills that can be really valuable no matter what you end up doing in life.
Okay, like what? Give us some examples.
So math is fantastic for developing logical thinking. You learn how to break things down step by step to see patterns and to solve problems in a really organized way.
Right.
Physics, on the other hand, helps you understand how the world actually works, like the underlying principles behind why things happen the way they do.
Okay, yeah.
And what's really cool is that both of them together really push you to think clearly, to solve problems creatively, and to be really critical in the way you think about things.
Okay.
And those skills are becoming more and more important these days, especially with all this talk about AI and, robots taking over jobs.
So you're saying like these are skills that AI can't just like replicate?
That's right. AI can crunch numbers and find patterns, no problem. But, that intuitive leap, that deep understanding of why things work the way they do, that's something that humans are still much better at.
Okay, that's good to hear. So speaking of the future and, all this crazy tech that's coming out, our sources talked a lot about how the physical world and the digital world are kind of merging. We're seeing self-driving cars, the possibility of space tourism, even 3D printed houses. It's wild. And the argument is that in this future, understanding math and physics won't just be useful. It'll be like having a superpower.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Think about something like game development. creating realistic movement, all the lighting effects, the sounds. It all depends heavily on physics and math. If you want to build those immersive virtual worlds, those skills are essential.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't want to be a game developer, just like understanding how objects move and interact in a game.
Exactly.
I could see how that could be useful for all sorts of other jobs it might use, like simulations or design.
Absolutely.
Right.
It all comes back to those fundamentals.
Okay, so it's not just like the super techie fields,
Yeah.
right?
Not at all.
Our sources were saying even design, like in general, uses this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Think about geometry and proportions, you know?
Okay.
Whether you're designing a building, a piece of furniture, or even a website, understanding how things fit together, the math behind those relationships, that's crucial for making things that look good and work well.
It's like there's actual math behind why some things just look more aesthetically pleasing than others.
Absolutely. There are mathematical principles like the golden ratio, which is found throughout nature and has been used by artists and designers for centuries to create visually harmonious compositions.
Wow, I never knew that. So, okay, what about some of the, I guess you would call them more traditionally non-STEM fields, like if someone wants to work in business or finance, where does math come in there?
Oh, math is still absolutely essential in those fields. Data analytics, understanding stock market trends, even how cryptocurrencies work, it all boils down to math, using math models and statistics.
Hmm.
If you want to be able to make smart decisions and spot good opportunities in those areas, having a strong math foundation is huge.
So it's like even if you don't end up being like a straight-up mathematician or scientist, having that background in math can really set you apart.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about if someone wants to start their own business, be an entrepreneur?
Well, math and physics can actually be really helpful there too. Physics can give you the knowledge you need to understand and maybe even invent new technologies. Like, let's say you're developing some new kind of energy efficient device. You need to understand things like thermodynamics to make that work. And math. Well, math is crucial for analyzing customer data, tracking your growth, making those big decisions about where your business is going. Our sources even made this point that I think is really important. They said understanding these subjects gives you the freedom to create, not just consume.
I like that.
You're not just using the technology, you understand how it works, and maybe you can even be the one to build the next big thing.
That's cool. Okay, so we're not just talking like abstract theories here, right?
Mhm.
I mean, our sources actually gave some real-world examples of people who use their knowledge of math and physics to do some pretty amazing things.
Right.
Let's start with Elon Musk. Everyone knows Elon Musk.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of hard to avoid these days. But what's really interesting about him is it's not just that he hired all these brilliant engineers at SpaceX. It's that he himself has a background in physics. That means he could really understand the challenges they were facing and contribute to the solutions. He wasn't just like handing off tasks, he was in the weeds with the technical stuff.
So, like, he actually understands the equations and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He wasn't just relying on other people to do the math for him. For example, his knowledge of rocket propulsion and orbital mechanics, which are all rooted in physics, was super important in the early days of SpaceX when they were figuring out how to build rockets that could actually get to space.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, so another person our sources mentioned was Katherine Johnson.
Yeah, she's amazing. She was one of those hidden figures at NASA.
Okay.
Her story is a really powerful reminder of how important it is to be precise with math.
Okay.
She did all these crucial calculations for NASA's early space missions. And the crazy thing is, she was often more accurate than the computers they had back then. It just shows you, even with all the fancy technology we have, that fundamental understanding of math is still so important, especially when it comes to, sending people safely into space and back.
Right. Yeah, lives depend on those calculations.
Yeah.
Okay, what about Steve Jobs? I mean, he wasn't an engineer himself, but he obviously built some pretty game-changing tech.
Right. And even though he wasn't, writing the code himself, he still understood how important it was to have people around him who did.
Yeah.
He was known for his obsession with precision, and he really wanted to be surrounded by people who were technically skilled.
Okay.
That came from a deep respect for how things work. He knew that if you want to be in control and really innovate, you need to understand the underlying principles behind the technology.
Okay, so this brings up a good point. I mean, let's be real. For a lot of people, math and physics, they're not the easiest subjects.
Oh, I agree.
It can be really easy to get discouraged, right? But one of the things our sources talked about was reframing that struggle, thinking of it more like building mental muscles.
I love that analogy. It's so true. It's perfectly normal to find these subjects tough. But when you push yourself to understand them, even when it's hard, that's actually what makes you smarter.
Okay.
It's like working out. The more you challenge your brain, the stronger it gets.
Right. And it's not just about getting good grades.
Right.
It's about the skills you pick up along the way
Yeah.
that can help you in all sorts of areas of life.
Absolutely. Math and physics, they teach you to break down big, scary problems into smaller, more manageable pieces.
Okay.
You learn to think systematically, which is incredibly helpful in any field, really.
So you're learning to be a problem solver.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You learn to analyze the situation, figure out what's important, and then come up with a logical way to find solutions.
Okay. I like that. So our sources actually painted this picture of, imagine yourself at age 25, maybe you're running a company or working on some cool project, and suddenly you realize how all that math and physics you learned, maybe even struggled with, is now actually helping you succeed.
It's about the long-term payoff, right? When you're in school, maybe you're wrestling with a calculus problem, and it's hard to see how it's ever going to be relevant to your life.
Yeah.
But those critical thinking skills, those problem-solving muscles you're building, they're going to be so valuable down the road, regardless of what you end up doing.
Right.
You're laying the groundwork for your future success, and chances are you're going to be really glad you put in the effort to learn those subjects.
Okay, so let's say someone's listening and they're feeling, I don't know, a bit overwhelmed by all this, maybe even a bit uninspired.
Sure.
What are some, practical things they can do to make learning math and physics more approachable?
That's a great question. One thing is try to visualize the concepts. Don't just get stuck trying to memorize formulas, Our sources suggested watching YouTube videos. There are tons of great videos that show these principles in action. You can find interactive simulations where you can experiment and see how things work. You can even build little models out of paper or whatever you have around to get a real hands-on feel for things.
Okay, so seeing it in action rather than just on paper can make a big difference.
Huge difference.
Okay, what else?
Another thing is try to understand the why behind the concepts, not just the what.
Okay.
Don't just memorize a formula. Try to figure out the logic behind it.
Yeah.
Why does it work that way? When you understand that, it's much easier to remember it and use it.
Got it. What if you're just, not feeling the connection to your own interests?
Yeah. Okay, well then try to find a way to connect the subjects to something you are passionate about. I mean, there's math and physics and everything, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're into music, gaming, sports, fashion, there are always going to be underlying mathematical and physical principles at play. If you can tap into those connections, learning becomes so much more engaging.
I could see that. And of course, there are, all sorts of resources available now to help people learn, right?
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of amazing apps and websites out there like Khan Academy, Wolfram Alpha, Brilliant.
Yeah, I've heard of those.
They can make learning more interactive and even fun. They offer bite-sized lessons and different ways to explore concepts, so you can go at your own pace.
Okay, so to wrap this all up, it sounds like understanding math and physics isn't just about, getting through school or something.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It's about equipping yourself with a really fundamental understanding of how the world works and developing those critical thinking skills that you need to succeed in pretty much anything you want to do.
Right. The world is constantly changing,
Right.
And being able to think logically, solve problems creatively, and understand how technology and the natural world work. Those are incredibly valuable skills to have. And the people who can do those things, well, they're going to be the innovators and the leaders of tomorrow.
So the message here is don't shy away from these subjects, even if they're tough, right?
That's right.
Think of them like tools.
Yeah,
Tools that can help you build your future.
exactly. And you might be surprised at the doors they can open for you.
Okay. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, just this. Remember that when you're working on those math problems or those physics concepts, you're not just, solving equations on a piece of paper. You're actually solving for your future.
That's good. I like that.
You're building the skills and the knowledge that will allow you to understand and maybe even change the world around you.
So it's like learning this stuff doesn't just give you answers. It actually helps you ask better questions.
Exactly. It opens up your mind to all sorts of new possibilities.
That's cool. All right. Well, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.